Yeah, recording now. So for the people watching this back, I just talked for about 10 minutes. But you'll pick it up. Sorry. I forgot to start the recording again. Rhea reminded me. Um, yeah, okay. So just while we're sort of paused there, are there any questions on that stuff? Yes, Miriam.
Just on the exercise and the process, have you any tips, let's say, on what you might start with? Is there an order of things you might start with, or is that just up to the artist themselves? Like, or do you think that maybe you should start with the voice, or is it just an individual preference? Like, or what would have Stanislavski have said about it?
Yeah. Okay. So with the process, okay, so you haven't done this process with me, and I think that probably all the Friday Studio guys will have if they've worked with me before, but we will do it in the Friday Studio as well, for both, because I'll get you to grab a character and do that exercise with them. So the specific exercise, which I will take you through, and you'll get to experience it in person, and you too, Tom, um, is to do with coming to a place of anonymous first. It's a bit hard to kind of do it here to kind of explain to you, but the premise of it is, Mirren, is that we all have our individual set of idiosyncrasies. So my voice doesn't sound anything like Liam's voice, for example, right? We're both men, we're somewhat different ages, but we're both men, and we both have our own individual tone, texture, and quality to our voice, right? But they're very, very different. Okay. But so is the way he holds his body when he moves, the way he gestures. He doesn't think about those things consciously. And this is partly the point, is that we do all these things subconsciously. So, the way I'm using my hands right now, I'm conscious of it now because I've made myself conscious of it, obviously, but normally we're not. But we all have our own very unique individual idiosyncratic pattern. We're not like anyone else on this Zoom meeting, or indeed anyone else in the world, not exactly anyway. So if you imagine that, if you go by the premise that your character is also a completely unique individual human being that lives in the world, right? And that character walked in, or joined this meeting here and popped up on one of those screens, they will be just as unique as everybody else on all of these screens that we're looking at right now. They're a completely unique human being. So then the process of the exercise is we find a place of anonymity where we take away our own choices of what we do with our body. And the Wednesday guys did this on Wednesday night. So, it's, I'll have to do it in person with you to show you, but essentially everyone's in a chair and we all have our own way of sitting on the chair. So you might stick your bum right down the front of the chair and, that might be what you do or whatever. So everybody sticks their bum back into the curve of the chair. Okay. So that takes away your choice about where you put that bum of yours, right? We all have our own way of folding our arms, crossing our arms, using our arms, laying them in our lap or whatever. And I take that away from you and I make you put your hands on your thighs. Okay. I take away your choice about how you cross your legs or whatever you do with your legs subconsciously when you sit, and I make you put your feet directly underneath your knees on the floor. Okay. And that gives us this sense of what's called anonymity. It's not called neutral. This goes back. This isn't just my stuff. I'm not making this stuff up. This goes back to Corporal Mime and Jacques Lecoq's work, and a lot of European tradition and also Asian tradition, in fact, where a kind of a state of anonymity is sought so that we can then build an idiosyncratic pattern for the character that's unique to them. So once you've done that, again, I'll show all this to you in person, so I won't go over it in loads of detail here. But then you close your eyes there, and then the idea is to actually see that character as a real human being, walk in the room and sit on a chair right in front of you. That's the kind of imaginative that you have to make. And I was explaining to the Wednesday guys, and again, some of the Friday guys will know this, some won't, that your imagination works in 3 different ways. As an actor, I mean, right? So our first thing to do is to take what's in the text. That is number 1. We must serve the text first, right? So we take what's in the text and we use that. So maybe the author or the playwright has told us, okay, this character wears these clothes and has a walking stick and has a, I don't know, an eye patch or something, I don't know. So we have to serve those. Or Richard III, you know, has a hunchback and a withered arm. It's in the text. We have to serve that in some way. How is up to us, right? Then the second thing that happens is that our imagination fills in kind of automatically the next stage of things that aren't given to us by the playwright. And I kind of use that example of, if you imagine yourself walking up a hill, you know, and if you were all to imagine yourself walking up a hill right now, there will be a certain percentage of you who have imagined that and saw yourself walking up a hill that has grass, right? Now, most people, in fact, probably the majority of people will have imagined walking up a hill with grass, but I didn't say grass. Okay, your imagination just filled it in itself. And another smaller percentage probably will imagine walking up a road, a hill, up a road, you know, or a footpath or something. But our imagination tends to fill in gaps. So if I said to you, there's a tree on the top of that hill that you're walking up, just imagine that now. You have imagined what kind of tree it is. Like, I haven't told you that it's a large oak tree or a tiny little twig of a tree or the Joshua Tree from the Joshua Tree album by U2 or whatever. You made that sort of choice. You're without even consciously saying to yourself what kind of tree it is, it will arrive there. It'll be informed by something that's gone into your head at some point. So that's the second way that our imagination works, is we fill things in on a kind of subconscious level. That's our imagination doing its own thing. This is what happens when we dream as well, or so they say. And then after that, there will be things that you won't see automatically. And so when you know, you can't see exactly how they cross their legs or exactly what type of shoes they wear or what jewelry they wear or how they wear their hair or the tone of their voice or something like that, then we can, as artists, make an artistic choice and impose that on it ourselves, right? So, and that's called making an artistic choice. That's where that term kind of comes from, really. It's where nothing else is there for you to source. You come up with your own artistic idea. Yeah. So then you've got this artistic vision. Now you asked the question, where do you start then? Where you start, and where I always suggest people start, is to think of the thing that really speaks to you of that character first and foremost. What's the thing that jumps out at you that really kind of defines that person, you know? So, you know, if it was Aoife Phelan over here, one of the things that defines Aoife to me is her thick Irish red curly hair, right? It's quite a unique head of hair. It's uniquely her. I'm sure there's other people with thick red curly hair, but when I think of Aoife, I think of her hair, you know, and the rest of her, obviously. You know, it's not, I don't just think of your hair. I think of how I want to help you as an actor. Do you know what I mean? But that's the thing that jumps out at you sort of first of all. It's that idiosyncrasy or that thing about them that makes you go, oh yeah. What's even more useful though than a kind of an aesthetic like that is a physical postural thing. So how they might sit, how their slouch works, because we all have a slouch of some sort, because our head's like a 10-pound bowling ball that sits on our spine all day long and gets pushed down by gravity. So we all have some kind of slouch, right? So even better is a kind of a physical thing. But it'll depend on the character, you know? So I mean, Heath quite famously, you know, he was talking about when he was auditioning for the Joker, which we talked about at one point, I think, the voice just jumped out at him. He just had this vision in his head of the voice, which makes sense because one of the most integral things to the Joker, of course, is the laugh, is the fact that the Joker has a particular laugh, and you've got to tick that box, obviously. And he had this vision of what that voice might sound like, and then started with that, and everything seemed to follow from there, you know. There's an actor in the applied art at the moment who finds that once the costume is on, he's okay. And Laurence Olivier was exactly like that too. Laurence Olivier always said he was nothing until he put on a costume. And once the costume was on, he just felt like everything else fell into place. The posture, the gestures, the unique way of moving through the world of that character. So that's kind of where one should start from, I suppose, or the best place to start. And then you fill in the finer details as you go. And once again, that could be given to you by the playwright. It could be the hunchback and the withered arm. You know, what are you going to do? How are you going to create that? You know, and of course, there's kind of there's the cliche, Richard III, but there's also other much more creative and interesting ways of approaching that as well. The Year of the King, I think I mentioned, was I talking to you guys, or was I talking to the Applied Art of Acting about The Year of the King, the book? Must have been the Applied Art. Let's see if I put my hand on it here. Pardon me. Where is it? Oh God, I really should just make this much more neat. It's like my brain could be anywhere. Sorry, give me one more second. Ah, no, it's gone. Where is it? Sorry, it might be inside in the house. It's anyway. The Year of the King is a book by an actor called Anthony Sher. It's, if you haven't read it, it really is one of those books that every actor should read, especially an actor who's interested in characterization on a level like this. So Anthony, Antony, Sher, Sher. I'm sure it was in here, but it might be in my bookshelf inside. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. I really just should put them in alphabetical order one day, but I know it would last about a week if I did. This is The Year of the King by Anthony Sher. Okay. And this book is about Anthony Sher was a South African actor, gay Jewish South African actor, and he had to get the heck out of South Africa in the 1980s. And so he got out and he went to England and became the Royal Shakespeare Company's like A-list actor. And very few people have actually heard of him, but he is actually one of the best actors there's ever been. And they asked him to play Richard III, and he invented a whole new way of playing that hunchback and withered arm. And this book is basically his diary about how he went through that process of physically transforming into Richard III. So if you're interested in physical transformation into character, that is fantastic, that book. I won it in my final year of high school. I won the speech and drama prize. That was my prize. Anyway, so the other thing about him is he's a wonderful artist, and he puts a lot of his sketches in here. Where is it? Yeah, so here's some of his sketches about how he was building the physical shape of the character. And he was studying scoliosis and different kind of curvatures of the spine and things like that to come up with his with his ideas. He looked into different kind of grotesque characters for face. He looked into using Adolf Hitler as a kind of an inspiration to his work. So they're all his own drawings as well. We saw this mountain. I think I'll just see if I can quickly put. Oh, there it is. Oh no, that's the bulls. He looked into the way the bulls have the big hump on their back, and he researched the way bulls move to partly create the idiosyncratic transformation into character. Very, very creative process, obviously. He looked at what the Kray twins, the criminals, the Kray brothers. They were part of his work as well. So yeah, he combined all of these different ideas and different kind of there's this particular mountain, not a great drawing of any sort, but this mountain just haunted him. That the shape of the top of that mountain, that was going to be his hunch at first, and then he looked into that, and and then bulls and spiders and different bits and pieces until he came up with eventually his own shape for the character. So that's kind of a really kind of ultimate sort of example of physical transformation into character. And I would imagine, even though he hasn't written his own book on it, probably Daniel Day-Lewis has a similar kind of process that he uses to get there as well. Okay. Physically quite painful, you know, a lot of hard physical work goes into something like that, but you know, the result is outstanding. You know, it is a very famous production of Richard III. Okay, so anyway, that's what we were talking about this week in the Wednesday workshop. It's what's going on in the Friday Applied Art of Acting. And of course, the Friday Studio guys didn't have a class, but you guys should start thinking about this. And I don't mind. Like, it's the important thing to say about it really is that it doesn't matter if this isn't the kind of actor you're going to be or want to be, because it is hard. You know, it is really quite hard work, and a lot of actors would rather, you know, not go through that kind of process, because it is quite physically demanding. You know, sometimes it requires losing an awful lot of weight or gaining an awful lot of weight, and you need to know how to do that properly and safely, and a lot of people don't, and they just starve themselves and all the rest. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff like that, but it depends on the character, of course.
I know the actor who played Steve Jobs in the Steve Jobs biopic. I read that he went on an all fruit diet just to get, you know, into shape, or even just to get himself into the physiology, you know, of Steve Jobs, where he just ate nothing but fruit salad and stuff like that.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, which is a discipline, of course. But, you know, we can do this. You just have to decide you want to. You know? We can do anything we want to. Our bodies are totally malleable, but we just have to work for it. You know.
But going on the what we were talking about last week, though, about casting and stuff, like if you look at what's been put out there, it's very rare that you will find a character on screen now that is anything but perfect in that they're able-bodied. There's nothing physical really or there's not a big challenge. An awful lot of the challenge is how they speak or their accent, or, do you know, like, I'm just thinking of all the different things that have popped up in television over the last while. It's all very perfect, isn't it? All the characters are all very perfect, really.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, really, it's the ones that, you know, it's the ones that win Academy Awards, which are pretty rare, that actually, you know, require this kind of work. You know, so if you think of, you think of Sean Penn in Milk, or I Am Sam. You know, those kind of where you're playing someone who is disabled or mentally incapacitated or physically incapacitated in some way, or perhaps it's a historical figure, obviously, you know, like Harvey Milk, or Lincoln, or somebody like that. And then, you know, you have to kind of shift and change. But you're right, Miriam. See, the thing is, with this kind of work, I was having this exact conversation with a student this morning. You know, you have to have the opportunity to prove that you can do it first, and that's the tough thing, you know. And you know, that's a bit of luck as well, that you can.
But it's a shame that in current writing, like, we all know someone, you know, our neighbors or our friends who are not perfect. Like, they're, you know, they might be slightly autistic, or they might have some disability, or they might have something's going on. We all know people like this, but it's not reflected in what we watch, you know. So that's a shame, for number one, is that. But as number two, then, like, well, it's a pity we can't have those characters that we can play around with. You know, it's just a shame, really, that people don't have that vision. I'm talking about, I guess, RTE or whoever. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing slightly. Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, there is, you know, these are to me, they're the most interesting stories. It's the most interesting story for me to explore as an actor is something that I haven't experienced myself, obviously. And even if I don't get to play the part, they're the kind of movies or TV shows I want to go and see, because it's a fascinating world. Because I don't know it, you know, I don't get it. But then again, Miriam, I would say too that even though, say RTE, for example, put stuff on, you know, if you think about what they have done in recent times, they are kind of worlds that are, I mean, apart from Fair City or whatever, you know, the good dramas, they are kind of worlds that are interesting, that I don't know really what it's like to obviously be a young person dealing with sex and the internet and whatever else. And so Normal People was a really fascinating world to me because I'm past that age. And so I look back on that and go, well, is that what it's like now, you know? Or whatever it is. You know, I think that's why kind of cop shows are interesting like that, or hospital dramas and stuff like that, because they're worlds that I don't work in, and you know, and I find them interesting to explore. But maybe the characters, sure, are maybe not as it doesn't require as much of a physically demanding kind of change, I suppose, maybe. Yeah, but I see your point. But yeah, just going back to what we're doing in class then. So that's the characterization stuff that we've been working on. And I would encourage you to try it, you know, because it's a class, you know, and you can try it, you can make an awful mess of it, and it makes no difference. It's an experiment, and everything's an experiment. So the idiosyncratic transformation exercise that we did on Wednesday, whatever clues you got from that Wednesday, people, you might keep going down that line, or you might, you know, go a different direction. You might change your mind. Throw that stuff out and start over if you want to. I just would encourage you to try it. Are there any more questions on that, on characterization and that stuff? And because I'll just start talking about archetype and antithesis and join that up with self-taping then, if that's okay.
This idiosyncratic transformation, that in itself would be a practice of the separation thing you were saying. You know, I list the physical and psychological separations. So like the things about this character which are different to mine. And then as you say, I sit in the chair, close my eyes, envision the description of this person whom I'm generating from the list of separations I'm making. And then I kind of become that.
Exactly.
Is that very much what it is?
Very much so.
Because that's what I've been doing. You know, I've been listing, you know, what would Hannibal do? What would he be like? And kind of just filling in my own stuff, you know, based on the script and exclusively just the script, and kind of let that.
Exactly. That's an excellent example of what I was talking about before. You know, if you're going to do something like Hannibal, then you've got to do your own Hannibal. I don't want to see Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal. I'm not interested in it. You're not going to do it any better than he did, because it's his, you know, it's his decisions. So yeah, absolutely. You go for that. I'd be really curious to see how that works. Yeah.
Obviously, you know, take into account, you know, the story as well. And I've also been like researching about criminal psychologists as well. You know, I've been reading about like what they do, how they talk, how they analyze, and, you know, taking that into account, like the professional, you know, stance of Hannibal's, you know, background in being a criminal psychologist, but also, you know, adding in my own ways as to how he does the scene as well, which are different to what Sir Anthony did.
Yeah.
As you say, it's an experiment I like to perform.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. That's fantastic. You go for that. Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, and like again, that's just that when you said that, there's a scene that we're working on from a play called Home of the Brave in the Applied Art of Acting, and there's a really interesting exchange going on between a psychologist and a soldier who is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and the actor who's playing that role of the psychologist is actually having just as much trouble, but, you know, as much of a challenge as the guy who's playing the soldier, who has such bad post-traumatic stress disorder that he can't walk. And I sort of in my head thought the big challenge is here, but in fact, the psychologist and the kind of questions he asks and the way he brings the soldier back to the moment that this happened, when he left one of his mates behind or whatever, is equally as fascinating as playing the you know, the victim of the post-traumatic stress disorder. So yeah, so now that actor is doing a lot of research into that. And of course, in the Applied Art of Acting, we have a psychotherapist come in and talk to the actors about their characters. So they come up with a list of questions to ask a psychotherapist as well. So Alan's coming in on Friday of this week, if the room's open, you know, if Dublin lets me in. Yeah. So yeah, great stuff. Yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay, well, I'll keep talking, and you can tell me to stop and ask me a question if you want. So, just again, a lot of you will understand already what archetype and antithesis means. So, have a think about it in terms of your characters, okay, and what you're doing with them and how you're building them. I'll explain it again, just in brief. I don't want to bore the people who know all about it, but at the same time, I want the people who don't to have at least a structure of it in their mind so they can start to play with it, and then we'll do some work on it in the studio when we get together again. So archetype is basically, it's when you talk about typecasting in the industry, I'll link it up to the industry and self-taping just for the purpose of the exercise here. It's what they see when you first walk in the door. So when Lulu walks in the door, we see a young woman, who could potentially play this particular age range, maybe 16 to 23 or something like that. She's, yay height, yay shape, yay weight, whatever else, and that's the archetype. So as soon as you walk in the door, there's a kind of an old saying that it takes about 7 seconds for the director to actually decide whether you're going to get the part or not before you even open your mouth. And it's usually to do with you filling that archetypal idea in their mind. This is what this character represents, so you all understand what that is. I won't go into that in any more detail, but there's different archetypes in the world. The commedia dell'arte archetypes are the ones that we look at in quite a lot of depth in the applied art, because it is a theatrical tradition where stock characters are played in every single play. So you have Harlequin, who's your mischief maker, and Pantalone, who is your old Jewish miser, and you've got Brighella, who's your kind of brute, and everything else, right? Those are archetypes, and they have no other layer to them, really. They are what they are. They are what they are on the tin. It's a little bit like the old melodrama. Okay, so in melodrama, you have your hero on horseback, your mustache tweaking villain, and your damsel in distress, and a whole lot of different scenarios are built around those three kind of stock characters. Yeah. Okay, so again, pardon the repeating of the analogy. The secondary school girl or high school girl is a really easy one to use, because when we see a high school girl walk out on stage, we see a high school girl, we don't know anything about her. Like Rebel Without a Cause, if you then get to know that high school girl, she'll come across as nasty, mean, head of the gang kind of thing. Bullies people, disrespectful to teachers, all that stuff. And then as the graph of the film progresses, we see the opposite of that revealed, okay? Which means that, of course, she's vulnerable and fragile and has a terrible relationship with her father, which is bordering on abusive, and all of that's bubbling in underneath. And we see that come through, yeah? So, and that comes through progressively over the course of the movie, which is, of course, what fascinates the audience. The audience sees this bully on the surface, and of course, she changes hugely. And by the end of it, she's basically become a young woman instead of a nasty little schoolgirl, basically. So she's very different at the end than she was at the beginning. So in terms of self-taping then, once again, you cover your archetype, which shouldn't be too hard, because mostly you'll be typecast anyway. Mostly they'll be going, okay, well, look, I'm not going to get Dave to play a role that Lulu will play for obvious reasons, right? So they usually tick those boxes pretty well, right? Sometimes you can kind of give them a hint, So, if you're going to play a golfer, put on a golf shirt instead of not, it's easy enough to do, and just give them a little bit of an imaginative hint that you can be that person. Then the job, of course, is to show what that character is at the beginning of the scene and how it changes at the end. And preferably to show these two layers, that we have an archetype and the opposite or antithesis of it in the same character. And we see the potential for both. Okay, so the mistake that we make in self-taping sometimes is we look at it and think, okay, this character is desperately sad or something like that, or depressed. And we play the sad, depressed character from the beginning of the scene to the end. And at the end of that, we're wondering why we didn't get a recall. And it's because we didn't actually tell the story. We proved that we could be sad or depressed or joyous, or whatever the generalized emotional state is from the beginning to the end. But we miss the point. And the point is the way that character changes from one side of that audition to the other. Yeah. And a character is simply not interesting without those two layers. It's like the old trope, you know, Superman is not interesting without kryptonite. You know, he'll just win all the time, you know, without kryptonite. So his enemies will find clever ways of, you know, dropping kryptonite in his soup or whatever, you know. I've never seen kryptonite dropped in Superman's soup. But now it has to be written. It must be done. But you see my point, right? And we're sort of discussing this with the work we're doing in the Wednesday workshop a little bit already. Lulu and David Rest is playing, they're both playing the characters of Father Welsh and Gurleen in the Lonesome West. Lonesome West? Yes. Yeah. And you can see the two sort of layers to Gurleen in particular, that she's a tough, you know. Now, why I'm pulling this example out, it's a good one because these things are mentioned literally in the script. Like she obviously behaves in this way. She doesn't take crap from anybody. It's always a good idea to look at what other characters say about your character as well to help you build this stuff up. And even Father Welsh in that scene says, "You're a morbid old tough," right? And in the scene, she's kind of quite, well, without being too over the top with it, she's trying, I think, to show him that she's not, that underneath she's actually quite soft, because of course she's hopelessly in love with him. But of course she's not going to admit that either, although she does, but does it as a joke. You know, we went through this. It's very cleverly written in that way. But of course you do have a lovely, you know, duality there in the character of Gurleen. And strangely enough, you have it as well in Father Welsh. Okay, so he's on the surface looks like a kind of inept priest who is, you know, absolutely hopeless at keeping his parish from murdering each other, which he can't do with any degree of success. But in fact, he's really good. He's actually got a really great heart. He actually is a genuine, you know, it's what a Catholic priest is meant to be. You know, and that's the kind of tragedy, is that there is actually a good one here, and he feels himself to be a failure. You know, and underneath that sort of self-deprecation that he's failed is someone who actually has his heart in the right place and is really committed to his parish. You know, so all of your characters will have these layers to them. And again, self-taping wise, you need to put across both of them. It'll depend on the scene that you get, but usually the scene that's chosen by a good casting director will give you the opportunity to show those two levels. Like there'll be, for example, on a simple level, someone who's super confident, you know, about their whatever their mission is, right? And by the end of the scene, we see that confidence completely shaken, or they seem totally professional, and then by the end of it, we see that they're childlike. So it'll be kind of like the opposite, again, the opposite of the archetype. Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, Tom here.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Just I'm thinking casting. Just while you're touching on that casting and going through the change that a character might do in a scene that shows the change in that scene, and you're saying that that's important for a casting director to see that you can do that and bring that to a scene. If you're doing, maybe I'm getting slightly off the subject here, but if you're doing a show reel, let's say, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing maybe taking 10, 15, 20-second clips from different things that you've done on film or self-taping, and you've put them together for a show reel, as I have done. Now I'm beginning to doubt that I've done the thing properly at all, because they're such short clips, you know, that they're not long enough to show a scene whereby a character can start off in with a certain mindset and change as the scene progresses and show the antithesis. Is that the word I'm looking for? Do you know what I'm saying? So how should we, maybe, I mean, I don't know if this is time for this discussion, but if you're doing a show reel, do you do a show reel with one scene that's a 2-minute scene, or does casting director not want to see you in different things that you can do?
Yeah.
With short scenes, it won't have time to show that change, is what I'm getting at.
Absolutely, that's a great question. So let me answer that one. And no, there's no digressions here. That's what this whole session is for. It's for me to talk, but it's equally as much as for you to ask questions. So this is great. So let me answer that for you, right? In a show reel, first of all, I'll start with this: that if Louise Kiley was sitting next to me right here, or Ali Coffey, or Maureen Hughes, or Frank Mazel, what they would say to you is, look, it doesn't matter if you don't have a polished show reel at first, at least, right? Just send something that they can send on to a director if a director wants to see you acting in something, even if it's just one scene and it's a 2.5 minute clip of one scene. That's all that matters, as long as it's good. Obviously, don't send them something that doesn't work, right? But if it's good, that's fine. Just send that on, right? Over time, of course, you create your own little show reel of different clips, right? Now, to answer your question about which bit you choose, so let's say you have a 3-minute show reel and you've got 6 30-second pieces in that show reel, right? Excuse me. The bit that you would the bit that you would ideally choose is the bit where the character has a major realization or epiphany in the scene. Okay, usually that will take place on a beat change, right? So, what's wrong? He says to his wife. His wife says, "I want a divorce." What? What we see, and this is the important thing about show reels, is we see the actor organically reacting in the scene. That's the thing that a show reel really needs to prove. And if again, it's particularly Maureen Hughes. Maureen will always say that she is equally, if not more, interested in seeing the actor listening than the actor talking. So it's that moment of, look, I want a divorce. What? It might be sparse dialogue in that moment for him as he grapples to come to terms with the fact that his marriage is coming to an end. But that's the interesting thing in the scene. Yeah. Often, of course, if it's the climactic point, it can be that point as well. So it can be beat one, which is the what's wrong question. It can be the climactic point of, look, I give up with, and often that climactic point will have a lot of emotion in it. But again, it's not about that. But they're the bits that you should choose. And going to archetype and antithesis, this is often where we see the antithesis come through the archetype. Okay, so we got the super confident kind of gruff man coming in, getting his beer from the fridge without even clapping eyes on his wife. Turns around and sees that she looks unhappy, and he's going along as if everything's fine, and then all of a sudden that is taken away from him, and we see the opposite of that, or the antithesis of that, and we see the scared little guy underneath who has all that confidence taken away from him and is looking down the barrel of an uncertain future. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think I have to redo my show reel.
Yeah.
No, it does make sense. Yeah, most of the things in my show are just me actually doing self-taping. It's just me talking, so I don't really have. There's no scene partner. There's no real moment in my little snippets, so to speak. So maybe it's something that I should just address and maybe work on again.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. I think I might have kind of told you that little story there of a girl I was working with through the lockdown. She's only 17 and over in Clare. She lives in Clare, but and that she did this. She did these self-tapes of stuff that we'd worked on. And yeah, so she might have done, I think she did like 8 or 9, maybe 10 scenes with me that went for anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes kind of thing, maybe 2 and 5 minutes. Some were shortish, some were more long. But when she put the show reel together, I helped her to choose those moments where we see the character change. And she just shot them with her mum. Her mother is reading the other part, and she's the wrong gender, for the role. It doesn't matter. They don't mind. They don't care. As long as that acting is good and we see that moment take place.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, that's a common thing that happens, Tom. And a lot of actors come to me and say, "Well, let's have a look at my show reel," and they've chosen the wrong things.
Yeah.
Often they've chosen a bit that has high emotion, where they
Yeah.
burst into tears or something like that, and that's okay. But it's kind of it's like they think that they kind of think that it's important to prove that they can emote, and it's actually not. It's kind of on the professional level, it's kind of taken for granted that that's something that just will happen.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, so do, and like the applied art of acting guys will know this as well. So when we film all this stuff in the course, and my advice to you always is take those bits where we see that character conflicted, compromised, where we might see the archetype come through, the antithesis rather come through the archetype. So I was using Lulu's example there. You can, there's wonderful movies that you can watch to study this. I mean, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri is just a perfect example of it. It's seamless from Frances McDormand. She's this tough, austere, hard-faced woman, and underneath she's just broken by the death of her daughter, and we see this. Then we see this change, and this is a fantastic moment, where Woody Harrelson's character coughs blood into her face, because he's dying of cancer, and all of a sudden this mother just comes pouring out, and she just takes him in her arms and calls him darling, and it's like, oh my God, what just happened? This whole other person just came out of a chest. It's one of those moments in film, in cinema, that you could just rewind and watch again and again and again, all of 7 seconds, and just watch it over and over and over, and it just didn't surprise me one bit that she was standing there with an Academy Award in her hand for it, because it's perfectly crafted archetype and antithesis work. But any film, if there's not a fragility underneath there, then there's going to be dramatic problems. I mean, you can kind of imagine for yourself, the audience. What does the audience want to see? The audience sort of lives vicariously through the protagonist. They kind of have a cathartic relationship with that protagonist, where they see that protagonist is flawed. They see that protagonist has, well, flaws is the best way to put it, I suppose. But that they are bound to fail, or that they may well fail, and because of the beginning of the arc, we've fallen in love with them at the beginning. Maybe in the metaphorical sense, but we want them to succeed, and then we see the danger that they're not going to succeed, and they get to that climactic point where it's fairly obvious that they won't succeed, and then we're emotionally involved in that. Then, it upsets us that they're not going to succeed. And then into the falling action. So if that character doesn't have those kind of layers to them, where we're vying for them to be the better person, to be the stronger person, when the weaker person in there is coming through and taking over, that's what's interesting to us. That's what we want to see. Any other questions on that stuff, guys? Okay, great. So yeah, ask yourself what archetype and antithesis might be working in your pieces there, and also then just in regards to self-taping, the next self-tape you get, which I hope you get one soon, right? Did someone speak there? Oh no, someone in the background. It's all right. I hope you get one soon. Look for it. Look for it, and you'll be surprised how quickly the attitude of the casting directors changes towards you. All of a sudden they see this nuance, they see these layers going on, and like I was saying to Mirren at the beginning there, that's what I was just going to come around to. If you keep putting in auditions and screen tests like that, even if you go for 2 years without getting anything, the fact that they keep on bringing you back for more means that they know that you can do it. You're trusted with it. And the same. And then this thing happened for me there the other day, yesterday, where I didn't get the parts that I wanted, right? But I got a smaller one. But look, at least it's a job. It's a €700 a day, so I'm not going to turn it down. But obviously for, you know, for me, in that, like those parts that I was auditioning for were historical characters from the 30s and 40s, and I really wanted to play them for exactly the reasons that we're talking about now. So even in the screen test, right, I went and I won't tell you the details of it just for confidentiality, but obviously I jumped online and and in the time that I had, I researched who those people were. What did they look like? You know, now short of cutting my hair, I had facial hair, so I shaved that down to whatever was required, and then shaved a bit more off for something else, and you know, and just created as much as I could a possible convincing historical reflection of who that person was, so that when they turn on that screen, when they go click, they go, oh my God, that could be that person. And then of course, you know, you run the screen test, you show that character has whatever archetype and antithesis, supreme confidence, and then not, right? Or whatever it happens to be, where they realize, crap, I've just stepped into something that I didn't realize I was stepping into, or I'm over my head and didn't realize it until this particular climactic moment. And we see that, right? And then, you know, you shouldn't be too surprised then, you know, when you get a recall. You should be going, okay, well, yeah, okay, I've got my recall now, what's next? Then they'll send you 2 or 3 more scripts for the same person, and then you start developing those and looking for the same stuff in them, and finding those nuances, you know. And then you've got them, and then the only reason they can turn you down is if you're just not quite right, meaning you're a little old or a little young, or you don't match up with, you know, this other actor who they've already cast, and that doesn't work for some physical reason that's completely beyond your control, you know.
David, I just had a question on some of the things you were touching on there. I think I've kind of found, and maybe it's kind of like a bigger problem in my head sometimes, but I find sometimes with auditions or self-tapes either, that when you talk about like the journey of the character and kind of the archetype and antithesis stuff, and I suppose the expectation they give off and the kind of revealing of, you know, what's underneath that stuff. I think sometimes in like an audition context, I'll kind of like feel like I'm synthesizing that a little bit, because I kind of, you know, versus like doing a scene or rehearsing like a 12-minute scene and stuff, you know, doing maybe 2 or 3 pages of something, I think sometimes I kind of like have it in my head what the casting director is expecting, or what they're kind of like what they could be looking for out of those 2 or 3 pages. So I think that kind of impedes on the you know, like the kind of natural kind of work that you'd kind of be doing, you know, in the context of like a longer scene, or like more time to let that journey happen naturally, you know.
I can see what you mean. I think that what that comes down to, Liam, and I don't mean to oversimplify when I say this, because it isn't something that's simple, is that there is an issue with your own kind of confidence there, because really what you're trying to do then, it's like you've decided that you're going to try to please the casting director by, as you say, kind of synthesizing, you know, this synthesizing the scene into what you think their expectation of it will be. Yeah. And I guess confidence is totally the wrong word to use. What I would encourage you to do is to apply this work to it yourself, because often you can actually surprise the casting director, or the director for that matter, with a choice that you might make that they didn't even come up with themselves, or didn't even think was possible themselves, rather than you trying to kind of fit you know what you think that they might expect of the scene. You know, so that archetype and antithesis, like I say, it will more than likely be evident in a self-tape scene, because they'll choose those scenes. They'll choose those scenes where those 2 layers are. And so if you then apply that to it, you kind of are fulfilling their expectations, because that's why they've given you the scene, but you're not doing it in order to fulfill their expectations. You've seen it for yourself, and now you're going to work out your way of telling that story, of allowing that to be revealed, and you rehearse it, and then shoot it, and it'll come through naturally. You know, you cut the cord and act with abandon, and it'll come through naturally because you've done the homework on it.
Yeah. And I don't even mean so much in terms of like creative vision. I mean, even like, and it's not always the case, but sometimes just in terms of like the mechanics of a scene, I'm kind of, I don't know if their expectation is the word, but almost like what the significance of this, say, like 2 or 3 pages is, because, you know, obviously there's not a whole lot that can happen in that time, versus, you know, like a full scene. But I suppose I kind of have it in my head that there's like a very specific thing they're looking for in that kind of stretch. So then I don't know, there's like, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's an extra something that doesn't go on when I'm doing a full play, or when I'm doing like a full scene or anything like that. You know, there's an extra kind of like actor kind of intrusion. I think that happens a little bit sometimes.
Yeah,
You know?
I get you. So you want to get the most out of that small bit.
Yeah, and I suppose just kind of apply the exact same technique that I would to a longer scene, and not kind of, you know, think, oh, well, something clearly has to happen. If they've only given me 2 pages, then, you know, obviously there's something. And I think as soon as you're in that headspace while you're acting, you know, it's not going to be that kind of cut chord acting you're talking about, you know.
Sure, absolutely. No, and I suppose it's not a kind of acting with abandon, sort of in an emotional sense either. But the thing that you have to remember, Liam, is that something is always happening. You know, there won't be a scene where nothing's happening, because every scene has to move the drama forward. So really, it's just a matter of identifying what that is and serving that. And I guess, again, being confident in yourself to say, well, I am serving the thing that is changing, the thing that is happening in this, without trying to force something else onto it that's actually not there, and might be there in a longer scene. But like I said, they will probably choose a major beat change. They will probably choose, you know, the what's wrong moment, or the inciting incident of the series or the episode. And with this material, with these concepts that you have in the technique, you can see through them what that change is, you know, and then serve that and let that be all it is. I understand what you mean, though. But I will stick with that answer, though, that the confidence to say, okay, well, I know that the character starts here and ends here. That's all I'm going to do, you know. And I'm not going to say to myself, okay, well, how emotional do they want me to be, or how, or something else, you know, how something do they want this to look? Just do what's in the script and hand it in. As long as you have done what's in the script, you know, and you've identified that archetype and antithesis and that change, so that the character is different at the end than it was at the beginning. Mm-hmm. My sons had an audition there for Louise yesterday. They both have exactly the same scene, which is going to be interesting if one of them gets it and the other one doesn't. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it's a big TV series that's being made. Lovely piece of writing, just fabulous. And, you know, in that, it's not a huge, again, I don't want to give too much of it away, but there's a young boy, obviously, because my young sons, and he's being told by his mother that he's going to be moving to another school. All right, seems like a reasonably innocuous kind of scene, but he doesn't want to move, you know, because he's got friends, and he's got, you know, he feels grounded and rooted to where he is, and he doesn't want to move. And so we ran it, and, you know, the lads learnt their lines. It was about almost 2 pages, I suppose, right, between the mother and the son. And as we rehearsed it, you know, they went through exactly the stuff I'm doing with you here. Okay, what are the 2 sides to this character? We've got this little, you know, he's quite rude at the beginning. She offers to drive him to school, and he goes, "No, I'm fine. Leave me alone. You know, stop hassling me," kind of thing. And you know, he's playing the tough guy, and he has that all taken out from underneath him. And by the end of the scene, he's lost. You know, he's been completely uprooted, whereas at the beginning of the scene, he's completely grounded. Now, both of my sons did it in 2 completely different ways, right? You know, one of them became quite emotional at the end. The younger guy, it was at the end, he was like, "What are you doing to me?" kind of thing, you know, and the chin was quivering kind of thing. But my older guy was like, "Fuck you," you know, I'm sick of this shit. And like the question mark at the end is this guy going to run away from home? You know, there was a much kind of tougher, different antithesis that kind of came through. There was almost a kind of an adult kind of rebellion in there that was interesting and different. And look, we don't know what the casting director wants, you know, and so there's no point in trying to guess that. You know, and if the casting director will only give recalls to the actor whose chin quivered at the end, then one son will get it and the other one won't. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that they don't know themselves yet. They're looking to see what the actor brings to this, how the actor, I mean, obviously, like I've been talking about, you have to mark that graph, you know, so that works. And the story works, and the character's different at the end than they are at the beginning, and then we have a question mark of what's going to happen next. But we don't actually know, do we? You know, what Louise or whoever actually wants from this, and she may not know herself. That's partly why she's handing it out to, you know, 300 lads around Ireland to see what they come up with. And if we get it right, you know, the only right is the one that I guess sparks their curiosity at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And not just her, but the director as well.
To surprise someone, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But again, you can't sort of deliberately surprise somebody either, because then again, there's a kind of broader psychology here where you're kind of handing over your artistry to someone else and sort of saying, well, I'm now going to try and fulfill someone else's desires for this thing, rather than to actually do what I am meant to be doing as an actor with this. You know, it's kind of a little, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but you know, it's a little bit kind of like, you know, what does the world want me to wear? What does the world want me to dress like? You know, what does the world, you know, how thin do I need to be for the world to accept me, kind of thing. And you kind of, you know, kind of acting sense, you're almost doing that for the casting director and saying, well, what do they want? What do they want? What do they want? What do they want? And the better question is, what am I going to do with this piece of work? How am I going to apply my technique and my artistry to this? I do that, I hand it to them, and if I've done it, you know, in any kind of right way in terms of serving the technique, then you've got every chance of getting a recall because you've told the story.
Yeah.
So it's
Go ahead, Lynn. Sorry, Lynn.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe it is more of like an acting mechanics thing than like a creative thing, because it's just, I don't know if I've explained it well, but I feel like it's a bit more like maybe to do with like anchoring or something like that, you know, like if it's a very finite kind of piece, you know, like it's a short kind of just excerpt or something, I feel like I have a harder time, not always, but in general, like I tend to have a harder time kind of just like anchoring into it. And I suppose, you know, maybe that's why, like, maybe I reckon it is something to do with just the fact that, you know, it's a bit more artificial, or I'm a bit more kind of like deciding like what the merit of this little bit is, as opposed to just, you know, kind of being immersed in it.
Yeah.
That might kind of more be the case.
Yeah, sure. Let's keep an eye on that and keep talking to me about that, Liam.
Yeah.
I think at the core of it, it's identifying why this is an important scene, not to the casting director, but to the story. You know, what's happening here, what is being revealed to the audience in this moment.
Mhm.
You know, how is the audience being moved along the story because the character's being moved along the story, because the character's changing.
Yeah.
It's compromise, really. You know, what you do, you know, which also fulfills or satisfies what the casting director wants as well. I mean, you want a surprise, but you also want to meet the brief as well.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Joseph. Yeah. I suppose, yeah. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we're all part of the same process, and I think everybody wants the same thing. So the director writes the script with archetype and antithesis in it. The writer writes the script with this graph in mind, with, you know, 3-act structure or whatever the case may be, the scene in that way, the monologue in that way or whatever. So what we're doing is coming in and saying, okay, I understand what you've written. I understand how this is structured. I will serve that. I will apply my technique to that. And that's my job. And then the creativity within that is how you form those different kind of dynamics. I think that, I know I haven't answered that in a really overly satisfying way. I'm just concerned.
So it's the execution, the imagination is what fills in the gaps, really.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. I just don't want you to force something onto a screen test that's not really there, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I've seen that before as well, where someone will get a screen, like some sides or a screen test, and then they force in a heightened, usually it's a heightened sense of kind of generalized emotion or something like that, because they think that that's what the casting director will be impressed by, and that will help them to get that recall. And it very often doesn't, you know. It's the one that serves the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's keep talking about that as we go along the term. It is a really great question. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's so many actors out there. There's so many actors going for these roles that, you know, if we have the confidence to put our stuff in, you know, and just and submit, and then let them decide whether it's what they want or not, then we've done our job, you know. We better finish up. Is there any other questions before we finish up? Okay, well, look, you know where to find me. As I was saying earlier on, the lab, I have heard nothing from the lab, and I was promised on Friday that if anything was to change in terms of them being open during this Dublin lockdown, that they would let me know. And I've heard nothing, so I'm assuming that they're open. But of course, if I hear anything different, you'll be the first to know. And as always, if you have any questions for me, guys, you know where to find me, yeah?
And sorry, David, just to keep in mind that if it is a Dublin lockdown, can people from outside of Dublin, do we dare enter the Pale?
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. You are allowed into Dublin according to the rules.
Are we allowed back out?
Exactly. Might as well stay there forever. No, according to the rules, you are allowed into Dublin and out of Dublin if it is for educational purposes or for employment. Okay. I have a letter that I've written up for my applied art of acting guys. It's just a letter from me. If they get stopped by the guards, they can show it to them. I can write one up for you guys as well if there's a problem, but I don't think it's going to be an issue if you're going in for a course and coming out again.
I didn't know.
But again, look, it's all up in the air, isn't it? I mean, they might change their mind in the morning, you know. Some of them, I know there was some talk of putting Dublin into a level 4 lockdown. It's like, what? Okay. If they do that, then we're back online. Then everything shuts, like even the shop shut, you know. So, I mean, apart from supermarkets, you know. But look, we'll play it by ear. If you need anything from me, I might actually write you up something and send it on that you can just show to a guard if they stop you. There's no letterhead on it and there's no signature. So you could have written it yourself, essentially. But at least it does have a phone number for the lab and it has a contact number for me. So if they want to kind of refer or ask or whatever, then, you know, yeah, then there's someone else to ask anyway. And it looks like you got someone you can refer to. All right. Is that all right, guys? All right, guys. I'll talk to you very soon. Okay. Stay in touch. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, David. See you Wednesday.
See you Wednesday. Thanks.